Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a body of work that, well, it didn't just influence things. It basically shaped how we've thought about the mind for over a century.
Absolutely. We're tackling the interpretation of dreams.
Or TID, as we might call it.
Right. And it's fascinating, isn't it? This text triggered such a seismic shift in understanding ourselves, our inner lives, yet it barely made a ripple initially.
Fewer than 400 copies sold in the first 6 years, apparently. Which is just wild considering its impact now.
It really speaks to how radical ideas sometimes need time to, soak in.
So today, we're not getting bogged down in publication dates or historical debates.
No, this is purely a deep dive into the theoretical engine room.
Exactly. The framework, the mechanics, the arguments within the text itself, what makes it tick, and maybe what it still tells us about our minds today.
And that framework kicks off with a really bold claim, doesn't it? Redefining dreams entirely.
It does. The idea that the dream isn't just some random nightly brain static.
Right, but actually the first and maybe the easiest to study example of a whole class of what the text calls abnormal psychical phenomena.
Okay, let's pause there. Abnormal psychical phenomena. And that sounds pretty clinical, like neuroses or something more serious.
It is, and that's the point. Dreams are put in the same category as things like hysterical phobias, obsessions, even delusions.
So not necessarily abnormal in the sense of pathological, but different from normal waking thought.
Precisely. Now, obviously, interpreting a dream doesn't have the same immediate practical payoff as, say, treating a severe phobia. You don't cure someone by analyzing one dream.
Sure.
But its theoretical value as a model, a paradigm, that's seen as proportionately much greater.
So if you can crack the code of the dream mechanism,
then you potentially gain the fundamental key to understanding those other, maybe more complex or debilitating phenomena.
it elevates dreaming from just, something that happens when you're asleep.
To a kind of fundamental scientific text produced by the mind itself.
A blueprint, almost.
Exactly, a blueprint for deeper mental processes.
Okay, so if dreams are this blueprint, what's the foundational principle? What's the core message?
Well, the absolute cornerstone, the most revolutionary idea in TID is wish fulfillment.
The idea that dreams are fundamentally about satisfying desires, where did that actually come from? It wasn't just plucked out of thin air. Right?
No, the text traces it back to around 1895. The first little spark seems to have been these simple observations, like the story of the medical student's dream of convenience.
The convenience dream.
Yeah, the student needed to get up and study, but dreamt he'd already passed his exams. The wish. To keep sleeping, obviously.
Right. Avoid the unpleasant task.
It suggested dreams served a kind of psychological purpose and economy, but the theory really became the theory after the analysis of a very specific personal dream.
The famous Irma's injection dream. July 24th, 1895.
That's the one. Analyzing that single complex dream seems to have been the catalyst. It convinced the author that yes, the universal function of dreams is fulfilling a wish.
So one detailed self-analysis basically launched the whole theory.
In a way, yes. And critically, digging into that dream led to what the text calls the most momentous discovery from dream analysis.
Which is?
The distinction between two fundamentally different ways the mind works, the primary process and the secondary process.
Okay, this feels really central. Primary and secondary. What's the difference?
Primary process is like the raw, illogical, immediate gratification part of the mind. Think images, connections based on sound or puns, no sense of time or contradiction. It just wants what it wants now.
The toddler part of the brain.
Kind of, yeah. Whereas the secondary process is our logical, rational, reality-testing thought. It can delay gratification, plan, understand cause and effect, follow rules. That's our waking adult mind, mostly.
So dreams operate primarily under the rules of the primary process.
Exactly. And that distinction is crucial for understanding why dreams seem so weird and why they need interpretation. And remarkably, even before TID was fully formed, some core ideas about how dreams work using these processes were already sketched out.
In the earlier Project for a Scientific Psychology.
That's right. It foreshadows the whole thing. We should probably list those key elements established early on.
Okay, let's break them down. What were they?
First, the basic wish-fulfilling character was there. Second, the fact that dreams are hallucinatory. The mind treats the dream images as real perceptions.
You experience it, you don't just think it.
Precisely. Third, regressive functioning thought moves backward, away from abstract ideas towards concrete, often visual images, like thinking in pictures.
Makes sense for dreams.
Fourth, motor paralysis. Absolutely key. While you're dreaming, your body's major muscles are inhibited.
So you don't act out your dreams.
Exactly. Otherwise, fulfilling a wish, say, to fly, could be problematic.
Right. What else?
Fifth, the mechanism of displacement. This is vital for the distortion we'll talk about later. Shifting emotional energy from an important idea onto a trivial one.
A kind of psychic misdirection.
Perfect way to put it. And finally, the sixth point was recognizing the essential similarity between dream mechanisms and neurotic symptoms. Condensation, displacement, they saw these operating in both realms.
So dreams weren't just weird sleep phenomena. They were using the same toolkit as psychological symptoms.
Yes, which cemented the idea that understanding dreams was the key to understanding pathology.
It's pretty amazing how much was already in place conceptually.
Yeah.
But let's circle back to that core thesis. All dreams are wish fulfillments. That still feels like a tough sell for, nightmares or anxiety dreams.
Oh, absolutely. That's the big hurdle, the central paradox the text grapples with. But it argues the universality holds and even points to popular wisdom like proverbs, suggesting people have intuitively grasped this for ages.
Like what kind of proverbs?
Well, things like the Hungarian one, pigs dream of acorns and geese dream of maize.
Simple desires.
Or the Jewish proverb, what
Ah.
do hens dream of? Of millet. It suggests that when the logical mind is offline, the brain defaults to satisfying basic needs and wants food, comfort, survival.
Okay, so how does this work with a simple physical need during sleep?
The classic example is the thirst dream. You're asleep, you start getting thirsty. That physical sensation threatens to wake you up.
Right, interrupts the wish to sleep.
Exactly. So the dream mechanism kicks in, it hallucinates drinking, you dream you're gulping down water, feeling refreshed.
So it satisfies the wish to keep sleeping by creating a fantasy that deals with the disruption, the thirst.
Precisely. It's an economic maneuver. Of course, the text notes this often ends in disappointment.
Because the imaginary water doesn't actually quench the real thirst.
Right. The relief is short-lived. The small effect of the imaginary drink eventually highlights the ongoing reality of the thirst, and you wake up anyway. But the dream bought you a little more sleep time by patching over the stimulus.
Okay, so if dreams are these disguised wishes, full of primary process thinking, how on earth do you interpret them? You need a method. And clearly, the old ways wouldn't cut it.
Not at all. The text spends quite a bit of time dismantling traditional dream interpretation methods, arguing they were completely unscientific. Arbitrary, basically.
What were those methods, like dream dictionaries?
That's one type, yeah. The decoding method, like you said, a dream dictionary. Every symbol, a snake, a key, falling, has a fixed meaning. The problem, it relies entirely on the key, the dictionary, which has no actual basis in the dreamer's personal psychology. It's just made up.
No connection to the individual's mind.
Done. Then there was the symbolic method. This was broader, trying to take the whole dream narrative and give it one big symbolic meaning, like saying any dream about flying automatically means ambition.
Too vague.
Too vague, too restricted, and again, no real rules for how you get from the dream to that meaning. And ancient methods, like those of Artemidorus of Daldis, often relied on whatever the interpreter associated with the dream element.
So the meaning came from the interpreter's head, not the dreamer's.
Exactly, which is totally subjective and unscientific. If a symbol in your dream reminded me of something, that became your dream's meaning. It's based on magic or association, as the text puts it, not psychology.
Okay, so all those are out. This leads to the psychoanalytic technique, which is radically different because it involves the dreamer directly.
Absolutely. That's the unique contribution. The dreamer has to participate actively. The whole goal is twofold. First, get the dreamer to pay incredibly close attention to every little thought or image that pops into their head in relation to the dream element.
Heightened self-observation.
Yes. And second, and this is crucial, they have to eliminate their own internal critic. Suspend judgment.
The censorship we talked about.
Exactly. That critical voice that says, oh, that's irrelevant, or that's silly, or that's embarrassing. That's the voice of the secondary process, the waking ego trying to keep things orderly and rational.
And that's why the typical setup involves lying down, relaxing, maybe closing the eyes to help silence that critic.
Precisely. Create an environment where thoughts can flow more freely. The core instruction is report everything. Whatever comes to mind, no matter how trivial, nonsensical, unpleasant, or disconnected it seems, don't filter.
Because the filtering is the resistance.
Yes. The critical attitude is what keeps the latent, unconscious thoughts hidden. To unravel the dream, you have to temporarily switch off that editor function.
There's a great analogy used for this. About the creative mind.
Right. The idea that reason needs to relax its watch at the gates of the mind. If you scrutinize every idea the moment it appears, you stifle creativity. You need to let the ideas rush in pell-mell, as it says, chaotic and unformed. Then you examine the whole mass later.
So the dreamer needs to allow that initial chaos of association.
Even if it feels extravagant or weird, those fleeting, seemingly random thoughts are the pathways back to the hidden meaning.
Let's see this method in action with the Irma dream again. It's used as the prime example of how these underlying thoughts work, specifically comparing the dream's logic to the kettle defense. What's the core wish behind the Irma dream?
The overarching wish, the driving force of the dream, was simple. I am not to blame for Irma's persistent pains. It's a plea for innocence, an attempt at self-exculpation.
Okay, a defensive maneuver. But how does the kettle defense analogy fit?
Well, the dream constructs this defense by presenting a whole series of arguments or explanations for Irma's suffering, all designed to clear the dreamer of responsibility. The catch is, these explanations are completely contradictory. They can't all be true simultaneously.
Right, it's not a logical case.
Right.
What were the conflicting arguments the dream threw out?
Okay, so first, it subtly suggests Irma herself is to blame. She's not accepting the proposed solution. She's being recalcitrant. Second, it implies her pains might be organic, something incurable, so, beyond the scope of the treatment anyway.
Not my fault if it's physical.
Exactly. Third, it points the finger at a colleague, Otto, suggesting he gave her an injection carelessly, maybe with an unsuitable substance.
Shifting the blame.
And fourth, it brings in the image of a dirty syringe, implying the pains are due to an infection from that. Again, an external factor, not the dreamer's fault.
So it's Irma's fault, it's incurable, it's Otto's fault, it's a dirty needle. It's covering all bases, even if they cancel each other out.
Precisely. Like the man accused of returning a damaged kettle who argues, 1, I returned it undamaged. 2, it was already damaged when I borrowed it. And 3, I never borrowed a kettle from you anyway.
Laughable in court, but psychologically revealing.
That's the key. The illogicality itself isn't a sign of mental failure. It's a sign of the sheer force of the underlying wish, the wish for innocence, which compels the dream work to grab any potential excuse regardless of consistency. It's a frantic, multi-pronged defense constructed by the primary process.
Okay, so the dream work is this sophisticated, if illogical, lawyer constructing defenses and fulfilling wishes. But where does it get its material? The images, the scenarios, the characters. Where do they come from?
Primarily from recent waking life, what the text calls day residues. These can be significant events or thoughts from the day.
Things that are actually important to us.
Right. Those can appear directly or maybe combined in the dream. But crucially, the dream work often uses recent experiences that were completely indifferent or trivial, things you barely noticed.
Why use the trivial stuff?
Because it's excellent camouflage. An indifferent memory fragment hasn't got much psychic energy attached to it, so it can slip past the sensor more easily. It acts as a kind of neutral hook onto which the dream can attach a much more significant, emotionally charged, repressed thought.
So the unimportant image becomes a stand-in for the important hidden idea.
Exactly. This is type C material, as the text labels it. The significant experience is represented by a contemporary but indifferent one.
Can you give an example? The Cyclamen monograph one illustrates this well.
Perfect example. The dreamer briefly saw a botanical monograph, something about the genus Cyclamen. Totally insignificant visual input during the day.
Just a fleeting glance.
Right. But in the dream that night, this monograph, or the idea of botanical, became a central element. Why? Because the analysis revealed it served as an allusion, a connection point, to a whole bunch of other significant thoughts the dreamer had been having, but maybe suppressing.
Like what?
Things related to a Professor Gardner, his wife's blooming looks, a patient named Flora, even the dreamer's own hobbies involving plants, and a conversation about professional duties. These significant thoughts were all sort of funneled through the innocuous image of the Cyclamen monograph.
The connection wasn't there initially, but the dream work wove it retrospectively.
That's the phrase used, yes. The indifferent image was selected because it could be linked, however tenuously, to the charged, latent thoughts, providing a safe outlet.
Okay, so day residues, both important and trivial. What about older memories? The text makes some pretty startling claims about memory in dreams.
It does. The concept of hypermnesia, basically, supermemory in dreams.
Okay.
The idea is that dreams seem to have access to memories that are completely unavailable to us when we're awake. Forgotten details, obscure facts.
Things we consciously believe we've lost.
Utterly lost. It suggests that maybe nothing is truly forgotten, that all our experiences are stored somewhere in the unconscious system, and the dream work can somehow retrieve them.
That's a huge claim. What are the examples given for this?
Well, there's the Musiddan dream. A man named Maury knew the name of this French town, Musiddan, but couldn't for the life of him remember where it was.
Common experience.
Right. But then he dreamt someone told him it was in the department of Dordogne. He woke up, checked an atlas or gazetteer, and it was perfectly correct. The forgotten fact surfaced in the dream.
Wow. Okay.
And maybe even more striking is the Asplenium lizard dream. A friend of the scientist Delboeuf dreamt vividly about a specific plant, an Asplenium fern, and saw its name written beside it.
Okay.
The key thing is, 2 years earlier, this friend had actually written down that specific Latin name on a note accompanying a specimen, but he had completely forgotten doing so, forgotten the name entirely in waking life. The dream recovered this precise, obscure 2-year-old memory trace.
That implies an incredible level of memory retention, even if it's not accessible consciously.
It really does. It suggests the UTs is like this vast, non-decaying archive.
So we've got day residues and this hypermnesia. What about physical stuff happening while we sleep? Noises, aches, pains, somatic stimuli, how do they fit in?
They absolutely get woven in, and the way they're incorporated is, again, driven by that fundamental wish to continue sleeping.
The dream tries to explain away the disturbance.
Exactly. It takes the disruptive stimulus, a loud noise, a stomachache, needing to pee, and tries to build it into the dream narrative in a way that makes sense within the dream, thus neutralizing its power to wake you up.
So an external noise gets incorporated.
Yes, the famous example is Napoleon the First Consul, supposedly dreaming he was in the midst of a fierce battle, hearing cannon fire.
When actually it was a bomb exploding nearby in the real world.
That's the story. The external sound was instantly woven into the ongoing dream narrative. Or a simpler one. A lawyer whose wife was coughing, Husten in German, dreamt about a place called Husiaten, incorporating the sound phonetically.
Clever. And internal stimuli, like being ill.
Same principle, often more dramatic. The text cites McNish's example of someone getting a sudden gout attack in their sleep.
Painful.
Very. And they dreamt they'd fallen into the hands of the Inquisition and were being tortured on the rack. The physical pain was dramatized, given a narrative explanation within the dream.
It translates the raw sensation into a story.
Right. But the example that really highlights the speed and ingenuity of this process is the guillotine dream.
Ah, yes. This one's quite famous.
The man dreams the entire French Revolution sequence, seemingly being arrested, tried, taken to the scaffold, the blade falling, a whole complex narrative.
And then he wakes up.
To find that the wooden top piece of his bed had fallen and struck him exactly on the back of the neck on his cervical vertebrae.
So the entire elaborate dream narrative must have been constructed almost instantaneously in the split second between the physical impact and fully waking up.
That's the implication. It suggests the dream work can fabricate incredibly complex scenarios at lightning speed, often working backward from the stimulus to create a plausible lead-up. It's an amazing feat of mental agility, even if that speed is perhaps an unusual advantage.
Okay, day residues, hypermnesia, somatic stimuli.
Yeah.
What's left? The text puts a lot of emphasis on the deepest layer, infantile material.
Yes, this is considered the absolute core, the ultimate source of the most powerful dream wishes. The idea is that dreams frequently tap into memories, feelings, and especially wishes from very early childhood, often the first 3 years of life.
Why is that period so significant?
Because it's before the ego is fully formed, before societal rules and repressions have taken deep root. These are the raw, primal wishes, often relating to parents, siblings, basic needs, and emerging sexuality. These early experiences lay down the tracks, so to speak, for later psychological life, including neuroses.
Can we have a straightforward example of a childhood wish in a dream?
Sure, the affectionate dream example. A little girl is very fond of her cousin Emil and wishes he were her brother.
A common childhood feeling.
Right. She dreams that Emil is now part of the family, calls her parents father and mother, lives with them. Her wish for permanent kinship is fulfilled. And bonus, the dream also throws in some recent wish fulfillment. She dreams she gets chocolate bars, something she'd wanted that day. The old, deep wish provides the structure for the newer, trivial one.
Makes sense. But then the text delves into much darker territory with the childhood death wish. That's obviously a very confronting idea.
Extremely confronting. The assertion is that wishes for the removal, which often equates to the death of siblings or even parents, are actually quite common in early childhood.
Stemming from jealousy.
Rivalry.
Exactly. Competition for parental attention and resources. A new baby arrives, the older child feels displaced, wishes the baby would just disappear. The crucial point the text makes is that a young child's concept of dead is very different from an adult's. It's not about finality or grief.
Not necessarily. It can mean gone away, absent, no longer a bother. The text gives that striking, if unsettling example of the little boy saying how much he loves his mother.
When you die, I'll have you stuffed, and I'll keep you in this room.
Right. It shows affection mixed with a complete lack of understanding of death's reality, seeing it more as a form of permanent possession, almost like a toy. The wish isn't necessarily malicious in the adult sense, but it's powerful.
And this connects directly to the Oedipus complex idea.
It leads straight there. The theory posits that the earliest affectionate and implicitly sexual feelings are directed towards the parent of the opposite sex. Boy for mother, girl for father.
Okay.
This inevitably casts the parent of the same sex as a rival, someone competing for the desired parent's affection.
So that parent becomes the target of these removal or death wishes stemming from jealousy.
Precisely. This primal drama, the love for one parent, the rivalry with the other, forms the Oedipal complex, seen as the deepest, most universally repressed layer of infantile material that fuels many powerful dream wishes throughout life.
Okay, so we've got these powerful, often unacceptable wishes, especially the infantile ones, bubbling up from the unconscious UAEs. But they can't just appear directly in the dream we remember. They have to get past that preconscious PC's sensor.
Right, and to do that, they need to be disguised, distorted. The dream work employs several key mechanisms to achieve this distortion.
Let's break down these mechanisms. The most fundamental seems to be condensation. What exactly is that?
Condensation is basically extreme compression. Think of it like taking pages and pages of underlying thoughts, feelings, memories, the latent content, and squeezing them down into the very brief, sometimes single image, manifest dream.
Packing a huge amount of meaning into a small space. How does it do that?
Two main ways. First, by creating collective and composite figures. We saw this with Irma.
Right, her face wasn't just her face.
Exactly. It was Irma, plus the dreamer's daughter, another patient, maybe his wife, all fused into one image. That single face carries associations and meanings related to multiple people. It's incredibly efficient.
One image, many references. What's the other method?
Multiple determination. This is when a single element in the dream, a word, an object, an action, doesn't just come from one latent thought, but acts as a convergence point for several different unrelated chains of thought.
Like the word dysentery in the Irma dream.
Perfect example. That word appeared partly because of a phonetic similarity to diphtheria, which was relevant to Irma's actual condition, but also because it connected to thoughts about another patient entirely, someone sent east who had an unrecognized condition, possibly related to dysentery in some associative way. Two separate thought trains meeting at one word.
These convergence points are called nodal points, right? Where lots of associations intersect.
Yes, a nodal point is like a busy junction in the latent material. Think back to the botanical monograph. The word botanical became a nodal point.
Because it connected to Professor Gardner, his wife's blooming looks, the patient flora, hobbies like artichokes, a childhood memory about books.
All funneling into that one seemingly insignificant word, maximum condensation.
Okay, so condensation packs things in. What about displacement? You mentioned it earlier as shifting importance.
Displacement is probably the most important mechanism for distortion, for disguising the dream's true meaning. It does the opposite of what you'd expect. Instead of the most emotionally charged, latent thought appearing as the most prominent part of the dream.
It gets shifted onto something minor.
Exactly. The psychic intensity, the emotional weight, is detached from its original source in the latent thoughts and displaced onto an element that seems trivial or peripheral in the manifest dream. The dream ends up being, as the text says, differently centered than the thoughts behind it.
Why do that? Why not just hide the important thing?
Because the censor is most alert to highly charged ideas. If the dream work tried to represent, say, a powerful aggressive wish directly, the censor would likely block it entirely. But if it takes the emotion from that wish and attaches it to something neutral, like dreaming intensely about a specific pattern on the wallpaper, the emotion gets expressed, but its source remains hidden. It's a clever evasion tactic.
We saw this in the Sappho dream example.
Yes. The manifest dream was all about the physical actions. Climbing up, climbing down, and navigating stairs, concerns about high and low. That was the focus.
It seemed like a dream about heights or physical effort.
Right. But the analysis revealed the latent core was intense anxiety about the social height difference, the dangers and perceived impropriety of a relationship with someone from a lower social class. The anxiety about social status was displaced onto the physical act of climbing.
Sneaky. Okay, condensation and displacement. What about symbolism? How do abstract thoughts get turned into dream images?
This is crucial. The dream work has to translate abstract, latent thoughts into concrete, primarily visual images. This is called the regard for representability. But the primary process which drives this has limits.
Like logic.
Exactly. Dreams struggle with logical connectors like if, because, either, and notoriously they find it very hard to represent negation, the word no.
How does it handle opposites or contradictions then?
Sometimes it just puts both opposing ideas side by side without acknowledging the contradiction. Or sometimes it might represent an idea by depicting its exact opposite, a kind of reversal. But often it relies on universal symbols.
Symbols that mean the same thing for most people.
That's the idea. The text argues there's a kind of shared symbolic language, appearing not just in dreams but also in myths, folklore, jokes, and even everyday language, as well as in neurotic symptoms.
Like what kind of symbols?
Well, elongated objects, sticks, knives, weapons, tools, even tree trunks often symbolize the male genitals. Hollow objects, boxes, chests, cupboards, rooms, caves, jars tend to symbolize the female genitals or the womb. Actions can be symbolic too. Rhythmic activities, climbing, writing, often relate to sexual intercourse. Water often relates to birth or urination. Falling can symbolize anxiety or giving in to temptation. There's a whole vocabulary.
Does the dream invent these or just use existing ones?
It mainly utilizes these pathways that seem already established in the unconscious, perhaps through deep linguistic or cultural roots. It makes the translation process more efficient.
And symbols can sometimes mean opposite things. The blossoming branch example shows this, right?
Perfectly. This illustrates the concept of antithetical meaning inherent in primary process thinking. In one dream, a blossoming branch, carried like a pure white lily, clearly symbolized sexual innocence linked to religious imagery.
Purity.
But in the same symbolic cluster, the branch was also covered in red flowers, like camellias. This directly alluded to the Dame o' Camellia, the courtesan who famously wore a red camellia when she was menstruating, signaling unavailability but also worldliness.
So the same symbol held both innocence and its opposite, sexual experience or sinfulness.
Exactly. The primary process doesn't feel the need to resolve the contradiction. The symbol contains both meanings simultaneously.
Okay, one last distortion mechanism. Absurdity. Dreams often seem completely nonsensical, logically impossible. Is that just random noise?
The text argues strongly against that. Absurdity or logical errors in dreams are not seen as failures of thinking. They are viewed as intentional creations of the dream work.
Intentional nonsense. Why?
Often, it's a way of representing criticism or ridicule present in the latent thoughts. The dream makes something look ridiculous because the underlying thought involves judging something as ridiculous. Or, even more profoundly, absurdity can be used to represent a thought that is utterly unthinkable or deeply repudiated by the waking mind.
Like a disguise through impossibility.
Precisely. Make it so illogical that the conscious mind dismisses it instantly. The example given is the man dreaming his dead father was alive but did not know it.
Manifestly impossible.
Totally absurd. But the interpretation suggests inserting the unconscious wish makes it intelligible. It is true his father is alive in the dream, but he had really died as the dreamer unconsciously wished. The absurdity being alive but not knowing you're dead becomes a highly distorted representation of the unthinkable patricidal wish, combined with the denial or repudiation of that wish. The sheer illogicality signals the intensity of the conflict and repression involved.
All right, we've explored the dream's wish-fulfilling nature, the methods of interpretation, the sources of material, and the complex mechanics of distortion. Let's pull back and look at the overall psychological model this framework implies. We need to get clear on the different systems. Consciousness Cs, preconscious PCs, and unconscious CCCs.
Okay, so in this model, consciousness CE gets a bit of a demotion from its traditional starring role. It's seen less as the seat of the self and more as, well, a sense organ.
A sense organ for what?
For perceiving psychical qualities, like an inner eye or ear that registers thoughts and feelings as they become conscious. But, importantly, sees itself doesn't store memories. It just perceives the present moment of awareness.
So memory resides elsewhere.
Yes, primarily in the preconscious, PCs. and the unconscious, hues. The pieces is like the antechamber to consciousness. It holds thoughts and memories that are not currently in consciousness but can be easily accessed if needed. Think of readily available knowledge or memories.
Stuff you know but aren't thinking about right now.
Exactly. The PCs also controls access to consciousness and, crucially, access to voluntary movement motor discharge. And during sleep, that motor control is largely shut down.
We mentioned motor paralysis earlier.
Right. And the PCs during sleep has one overriding goal: maintain the wish to sleep. It acts as the gatekeeper, the censor, trying to prevent disturbances from reaching Cs and waking the sleeper.
And below that, the unconscious.
That's the deep reservoir. It contains the powerful instinctual drives and wishes, many stemming from infancy, that have been repressed, actively pushed out of, and denied access to the PCs and Cs because they are unacceptable or conflict with reality or morality.
Governed by that irrational primary process.
Entirely. The UX is timeless, illogical, operates on the pleasure principle, and is constantly active day and night, pushing its contents towards expression.
So sleep involves this dynamic.
Yeah.
The PC's trying to maintain quiet, while the UX is potentially disruptive. How does a dream fit into this struggle to sleep?
The dream is essentially a compromise. It's the PC's way of dealing with disturbances that threaten sleep. These disturbances can be external, noise, internal physical needs, pain, or, most importantly, psychic, a powerful wish pushing up from the UX.
So the PC's makes a deal.
Sort of. It allows the disturbing element, the noise, the pain, the repressed wish to achieve a disguised, hallucinatory fulfillment within the dream narrative. By weaving the stimulus into a story, it reduces its raw, disruptive power.
It pacifies the disturbance to allow sleep to continue.
Exactly. The dream is a guardian of sleep. It allows a censored, distorted expression of the wish from the euchics or from the need to deal with stimuli, precisely in order to prolong sleep.
Which is why the text says all dreams can be described as dreams of convenience.
Yes, because the fundamental convenience they serve is the PC's wish to maintain the state of sleep. That overarching wish lends its support to whatever specific unconscious wish is finding expression.
Okay, but we have to tackle the big one again. Anxiety dreams, nightmares. If dreams are wish fulfillments designed to preserve sleep, why are some so terrifying that they wake us up in panic?
This is where the role of the ego becomes critical. The text argues that even these distressing dreams are still fulfilling a wish. The problem is, it's a wish originating in the UX.
A repressed, forbidden wish.
Whose fulfillment, if recognized, would be absolutely horrifying or unacceptable to the dreamer's conscious sense of self, their ego.
So the UX gets its wish, but the ego freaks out.
That's a good way to put it. The censorship mechanism of the PCs has failed or been overwhelmed. The repressed wish, maybe aggressive, maybe sexual, maybe something else deemed taboo, breaks through and finds expression in the dream scenario.
And the conscious part of the mind reacts.
The ego, the part aligned with reality and morality, recognizes the true, unacceptable nature of the fulfilled wish, even through the distortion. It reacts with what the text calls violent indignation.
And that reaction is the anxiety.
Yes. The overwhelming anxiety is the ego's desperate defense mechanism against the emergence of the unbearable repressed content. The anxiety becomes so intense it shatters the compromise, ends the dream, and forces the dreamer awake, often in terror. The nightmare is a failed attempt at wish fulfillment where the repressed content was too strong or the disguise too thin.
Wow. Okay. So the whole complex machinery condensation, displacement, symbolism, the battle between youths, PCs, ego, this isn't just about sleep. It connects directly to waking life problems.
Absolutely central. The text constantly emphasizes the complete identity between the mechanisms of the dream work and the mechanisms that create psychoneurotic symptoms, phobias, obsessions, hysterical conversions.
The same tools are used.
The exact same tools. Condensation, displacement, symbolic representation, dealing with conflicting wishes. This is the justification for using dream analysis as a primary tool in psychoanalytic therapy. If you understand how the dream works, you understand how the symptom works. Conclusions can be carried over.
This takes us beyond the individual psyche, though. The text uses this framework to look at culture, specifically through Oedipus and Hamlet. How did that work?
It uses these two towering works of literature as metaphors for a kind of secular repression, a historical shift in how humanity deals with these core unconscious conflicts, particularly the Oedipal complex.
So Oedipus Rex represents an earlier stage.
Yes. In Oedipus, the core wishful fantasy of childhood, kill the father, marry the mother, is brought right out into the open and realized. It happens, tragically but undeniably. It's presented directly as it would be in a dream, the text says.
The raw, primal wish made manifest.
Right, and the ancient Greek audience could confront this material directly, perhaps finding a kind of catharsis in seeing the universal taboo played out.
But Hamlet is different.
Completely different. In Hamlet, the same underlying Oedipal material is intensely repressed. The entire play revolves around Hamlet's inability to act, his paralysis, his hesitation in avenging his father.
Why can't he act?
The interpretation offered is that the task itself, killing Claudius, the man who murdered his father and married his mother, confronts Hamlet with the unconscious reality of his own repressed Oedipal wishes. Claudius has done what Hamlet unconsciously longed to do.
Seeing his own dark wishes realized in the other man paralyzes him.
Exactly. It generates immense internal conflict, guilt, self-reproach, leading to neurotic symptoms, his madness, his delays, his displaced aggression, rather than direct action. The secular advance of repression, as the text calls it, means the modern psyche, represented by Hamlet, can no longer confront this material directly, but is instead crippled by it when it gets too close to the surface.
So Oedipus is the dream played out. Hamlet is the neurosis resulting from the repression of the dream wish.
A powerful analogy for how increasing civilization demands increasing internal repression, transforming raw wishes into complex psychological knots. #HowCheckOutro.
We've covered a huge amount of ground today, tracing that winding path from the often bizarre surface of the dream, the manifest content,
All the way back down through layers of distortion.
to the latent dream thoughts driven by those powerful, often hidden wishes. We've seen how seemingly random associations are actually displacements, substitutes for deeper suppressed ideas.
And how, when our conscious, rational control relaxes, like in sleep, or even in the analytic process of free association, these hidden purposive ideas, these wishes, inevitably take the reins and direct the flow of thought.
It really forces a radical rethinking of consciousness itself, doesn't it? If all this complex, meaningful activity is happening unconsciously.
That's perhaps the most profound takeaway. The text argues that once you accept the reality of this vast, unconscious psychical realm, the old sharp distinction between conscious life and dream life starts to blur.
Consciousness isn't the main event anymore.
It's relegated, as we said earlier, to being only that of a sense organ for the perception of psychical qualities. It perceives, but it doesn't generate or store the bulk of mental life.
So the mind is this vast territory, and consciousness is just a small spotlight illuminating a tiny patch.
A perfect image. Most of the landscape, most of the mental reality exists outside that beam of awareness. Knowledge is mental, but only a fraction is consciously perceived.
That's the final challenge, maybe, the provocative thought to leave everyone with. It's like thinking about gravity.
How so?
You know, the gravitational force of a massive object like a star or a black hole extends far, far beyond its visible light, subtly influencing everything around it.
Ah, I see. So the utis, the repressed wishes, the infantile material, that's the dark mass within us.
Maybe. Exerting its silent pull on our thoughts, feelings, actions, way beyond what our conscious spotlight can ever fully illuminate.
A humbling and perhaps slightly unsettling thought to take into your own dreams tonight. What unseen forces are shaping your inner world?
Indeed. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture